I took an oath, just like these gentlemen, same oath, when we became police officers, to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the United States and the state of Washington, the Constitution. We took that oath, okay? But recently, in the state of Washington, there's been some controversial things that have come out that people wonder, is this constitutional or not? And what does the sheriff do? And we've heard sheriffs make statements about what they will or will not do. So as sheriff, I'm charged with upholding people's rights, right? And we have to protect people's rights, everybody's rights, all citizens. This has already come up a few years ago on 2 incidents with gun seizures that we felt. I met with the prosecuting attorneys and said, I think we have an issue with this. So there needs to be discretion and discernment what we're going to do when a gun law is passed, certain gun laws. And I met with Tony Golick's office and says, I think this one's a problem. Has not gone through the judicial process. That's the one problem that our legislators do. They can pass laws that have not gone through the judicial process, so that it puts our frontline people out there in making these decisions. That's very difficult. Met with them, and we decided not to take action, but to document and record. So we already had one. I do not believe, and I'm going to say this tonight because I think we should have all candidates up here say this. I do not believe it's my job to overstep my bounds as executive branch and say, I believe a law is unconstitutional. But I have discretion on how we will enforce or not enforce those laws. We use discretion every day, a jaywalker, a speeder, we just saw them, can give them a ticket or not give them a ticket. There's only a few laws in the state of Washington that were mandatory to make an arrest. So I will use discretion and discernment and talk about those things because it's a big issue. I'm not sure, if you go in and as a sheriff, as an executive branch is what we are, and try to be the judicial branch, there's 3 different branches of government for a purpose, and it's unfortunate that is that way. So I think we should have all the candidates explain if they can make a law unconstitutional or not.
Mr. Reynolds.
Rosa Parks got on a bus and she sat down. She sat down. In walks somebody, a white person, and says, give me your seat. She said, no, I'm not doing it. An officer walked in and arrested her. Rosa Parks got arrested for that. Her civil rights were violated because there was a law that said it was okay to arrest her. Several people in Tulsa, Oklahoma were jailed, and some 300 were killed. 6,000 were placed into detainment camps because there was a law that allowed it to happen. Because the sheriff didn't have a decision, didn't have the guts to stand up and say, this is wrong. Simply put, I will not enforce unconstitutional laws in this state. Your Second Amendment rights are absolutely critical to me. 1639 is a major violation of your civil rights. When you sign that piece of paper, if you didn't know it, you give the sheriff and and your police departments the right to search your records. That is a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. It cannot be held. And you need to understand that there comes a time where you need to say no. And this is such a time. So as your sheriff, you have my word, that will not happen.
And Mr. Shook, you will now answer that question, please.
Well, thank you. Hey, I appreciate your clapping there. Actually, there are laws passed every day that are unconstitutional. Our legislature is not checking the Constitution before they're making these laws. Being an executive in the executive branch, just like the governor, just like the city mayors and so forth and so on, we have choices. We have choices on whether or not we are going to arrest people or we're going to enforce those laws. We have the discretion, as John had said. And I agree with that assessment. If I find that it's unconstitutional, we have that discretion until the law says you don't. There are some laws that the legislature is like, listen, Sheriff, you're going to jail. You're the one who's ultimately responsible. Now, Ray said 1639 is unconstitutional or it's violating your rights. I've seen many folks that were experiencing mental health and other issues, criminal folks that have killed loved ones and whatnot. I don't mind that there's a background done as long as there's due process on getting your guns back and figuring it out. It's not an all or nothing. It's a temporary moment. Those homeless folks, those mentally ill folks. So unconstitutional law should not be followed, and we have the discretion as executives and the sheriff, as the sheriff, to not follow those unconstitutional laws. So thank you.
So is there any 1 minute rebuttal, Mr. Horch?
Yes, I already did that. I already had a few examples where we didn't follow it, and I just brought them up. So it's already come up. But what I want to know, I don't know if I can ask questions here, is do you feel as Sheriff Ray Reynolds that you can deem a law as unconstitutional, that the law is unconstitutional, not that you have discretion on how you do it, but that you have the sole authority to determine if a law is unconstitutional without it going through the judicial process?
Thank you, John. That's a good question. Here's the answer. Every day that I work, I have to make a decision on what's constitutional. The court, especially when you're looking at, say that there's a chance where the officer has to decide whether to seize a child or not because of an abusive situation. The courts have ruled that the officer is the expert on Fourth Amendment decisions. That decision came up very clearly, that the officer has to make a decision. Do I have probable cause, and do I have an exigent circumstance, and does it fit within the Constitution? Officers that decided to take a child that did not have those two qualities were deemed that they had violated the civil rights of that family. So yes, we are considered the expert on the Constitution. We are considered the experts by the courts on what the Fourth Amendment is. So yes, I will make that decision.
You didn't answer the question. You didn't answer the question. I'm just curious. Are you the sole authority to determine if a law, not process, is unconstitutional? You as sheriff are the sole authority. That's the question. You said yes? Okay.